When you went to Columbia, did your paths cross with Telford Taylor?
Yes. Yes.
Well, tell me about him.
He was, well, I had two links to him. He was my constitutional law professor, and he was fabulous. I mean, and of course he was a hero because of the Nuremberg trials, and he's a very good teacher and a very smart man.
You obviously worked your way into the Department of Justice. Was that a career path for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and the Department of Justice was the preeminent place if you wanted to start trying cases. If you went to a law firm, basically you would be in a library doing research and avoiding trials.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole goal. And if you wanted to actually be in the courtroom, Justice was a better place.
Attorney General at the time was?
Well, when I was hired, it's still the Democrats. By the time I actually started, I think the inauguration of Richard Nixon was maybe a few weeks after.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Will Wilson, whose name came up today in our conversation about the pardon, was the head of the criminal division, which is where I was assigned. I had been prosecuting cases for 5 years. My boss was Chuck Ruff, Charles Ruff, who became the fourth Watergate special prosecutor. And he was hired early on for the campaign contributions task force and gave my name to Cox. And I got a call to come in for an interview. Was interviewed by Jim Vorenberg, who started the interview with the question of, when can you start? I said, start? I'm here. He said, no, I don't mean start the interview. I mean, when can you start work? I said, well, wouldn't you like to interview me first? He said, no, I've checked your background and your trial record. We want you to start. When can you start? So that was the beginning of my going over there. And it was the 5 years of trial experience at the Department of Justice that qualified me for that.
On the actual, as I understand it, there were 3 task forces?
I think there were more.
More? And you were assigned to?
The main obstruction of justice Watergate cover-up case. So at the time, Jim Neal was head, and then Rick and I were the 2 other trial lawyers. Then Jim returned to Tennessee because when he was hired, he said he could only stay a short while. He had just started a law firm, and that he would come back for the trial, but he couldn't stay for the indictment. So Rick and I took over for the indictment phase. The trial of the burglars had already finished, and that included some committee to re-elect and White House people. And it included the wonderful Judge Sirica, who did not believe for 1 minute that they were acting on their own. He always believed that there was someone higher up in the White House, or for sure at the committee to re-elect the president, known as CREEP, that were involved in it. He was about to sentence the defendants. McCord wrote a letter that said, "Dear Judge, you are right. People have lied in your courtroom. There are people higher up there," and he goes all through everything about hush money has been paid to keep us quiet. And that was really the beginning of what became the cover-up. Mm-hmm. Proof. John Dean had already started talking to the prosecutors of the criminal burglary trial. But in May, Cox was appointed. I was hired in May. Everybody, I mean, it was all happening very, very fast. And so we had John Dean,
Mm-hmm.
but think about it.
Had he testified? Had he gone to Congress yet?
His testimony in Congress, I think, was after, but not very much after.
Mm-hmm.
And when he testified, he did not know there were tape recordings of his conversations.
Mm-hmm.
When we heard in July, which is after his testimony, that there were tapes, we knew that we either finally had corroboration of his testimony, because otherwise it was him against the president, and honestly, in that fight, the president's going to win.
Right.
But once we heard it, we knew either we would prove he was lying, or as we believed, we would prove that he was 100% accurate. And of course, the tapes, when he says, on March 21st, I told the president there's a cancer, you listen to the tape, it says exactly what he said. Everything he said was exactly correct.
But at that point, you really didn't know there were tapes, did you?
No, not when we started.
Right.
Knew that in July when Butterfield testified.
Did you pinch yourself every once in a while to think in a short period of time so much happened? I mean, just when you go back and do a timeline of just your involvement, your participation, 5 years at the DOJ, and all of a sudden,
The evidence was coming so fast, and you couldn't not believe as things developed. And then, of course, once we got the tapes, there was no question of guilt.
The honeymoon between the new special prosecutor and the White House was over.
Jail yesterday, you shouldn't want it.
Jaworski's team was ready to proceed with a massive indictment against the key Watergate conspirators.
when I say, Haldeman, what's your reaction? What's your visceral reaction?
Well, as to all of them, I would say guilty and amoral, because they had to know what they were doing was wrong and that the ends do not justify the means. Haldeman, I think of his daughter, who I really felt sorry for. She dropped out of law school to assist in his defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought of course she wasn't a member of the bar, so she sat behind the bar. But how painful to listen to the testimony of the things your father has done. It made me feel terrible. Ehrlichman and Haldeman, because of the setup of the courtroom, were sitting the closest to me of all the defendants.
Mm-hmm.
And I could watch John Ehrlichman doing doodles, which he did throughout the trial. But we never had a conversation. I mean, there was no humor. In terms of even the lawyers, Len Garment was my favorite because he, unlike any of the others, realized that we could be doing a job without any personal animosity, and that we could be decent human beings, and he treated us that way. So of course I liked him a lot, whereas the others, it was really, we're the enemy.
Yeah.
And we're not the enemy.
There's some of the other folks that you had to stumble onto. Your paths crossed all the players.
Yes.
E. Howard Hunt.
Well, there's one great story about E. Howard Hunt that actually involves someone else, Phil Hyman, who came with Archie from Harvard, and was just really curious about how you do a black bag job. What do you call it? Black bag job, and called Howard Hunt, who was in jail at the time, to come to the office. And Hunt, as Phil tells the story, says, "I don't know why you want to know, but it's easy." And he's sitting opposite in Phil's office, and he says, "Well, first, of course, you have to plan what it is you want. You break in," and he said, and he stands up and he goes to the door, so you walk into the office, and you take a picture before you enter. So you have a photograph on a Polaroid of how the office looks. Then you find the document you want, and you use a very good camera to take pictures of the document. But before you remove the document, you take a Polaroid of what that drawer looked like. Photograph the document with a good camera, you put it back, you pull the thing out of your pocket, make sure that everything looks the same. Then he gets up and he says, and then you walk back to the door, you look at the pictures that you pull out of your pocket and make sure that the whole office looks the same, and then you leave. And he walks out, and Phil's waiting for him to come back. He's waiting, and he's waiting, and all of a sudden he realizes that Hunt, who is in prison, has just left his office without any marshal. And he screams, "Marshals, Marshal, Hunt is gone!" And they recovered Hunt.
Clever. Thank
Okay.
you
You're
ever so
welcome.
much.